Welcome to Tales of the Twisted, true stories of the strange, weird, bizarre, and shocking. This is the true story of the girl in the basement. August 28th, 1984. 18-year-old Elisabeth Fritzl went missing. The day started off pretty ordinary. Elisabeth's father was working in his basement and asked his daughter an innocent request. Could she help him hoist a door into its frame? Elisabeth climbed down the stairs into the basement and helped her dad with this simple request. Once the door was hung, she turned to leave, and at that moment, a piece of cloth soaked in chloroform was held over her mouth and nose. Then everything went dark. Little did Elisabeth or Yosef's wife know, but Yosef had been planning what was effectively a dungeon for years, receiving official permission to construct his cellar complex as far back as the late 1970s. It wasn't difficult to get officials to approve underground constructions, since it was at the height of the Cold War, and this, after all, was Lower Austria, which during those years, the country was on the frontier with the Soviet Union. So nuclear bunkers were seen as a normal and necessary addition. The local council had even given him a grant of a couple of $1,000 towards the building costs. At first, Yosef placed cuffs on her arms and then tied them behind her back with an iron chain, which he then secured to metal posts behind her bed. She could only move approximately 1 foot on either side of the bed. Elisabeth's mother, Rosemary, hastily filed a missing persons report, frantic over the whereabouts of her daughter. For weeks there was no word from Elisabeth, and her parents were left to assume the worst. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived from Elisabeth, claiming she had grown tired of her family and run away. Her father, Yosef, told the policeman who came to the house that he had no idea where she would go, but that she likely joined a religious cult, something she had talked previously about doing. But the truth was that Yosef Fritzl knew exactly where his daughter was. She was about 20 feet directly below where the police officer was standing. As far as the Fritzl family was concerned, Yosef would head down to the basement every morning at 9 a.m. to draw plans for the machines that he sold. Occasionally, he would spend the night, but his wife wouldn't worry. Her husband was a hard-working man and was thoroughly dedicated to his career. But as far as Elisabeth Fritzl was concerned, Yosef was a monster. At the minimum, he would visit her in the basement 3 times a week and assault her. It's estimated that he assaulted his daughter upwards of 3,000 times. 2 years into her captivity, Elisabeth became pregnant, though she miscarried 10 weeks into the pregnancy. 2 years later, however, she fell pregnant again, this time carrying to term. In August of 1988, a baby girl named Kirsten was born. She delivered the baby alone with only a book on pregnancy, which her father had begrudgingly provided her as a guide. 2 years later, another baby was born, a boy named Stefan. Kirsten and Stefan remained in the cellar with their mother for the duration of her imprisonment. Yosef would bring weekly rations of food and water to keep them alive, as Elisabeth attempted to teach them the basic education she herself had, and try to give them the most normal life she could, considering the circumstances. About 1.5 years later, Elisabeth gave birth to a daughter named Lisa in August of 1992. But though Stefan and Kirsten remained with their mother, Yosef decided to take Lisa out of the basement because of the lack of space. When Yosef decided to take Lisa out of the basement, he placed Lisa in a cardboard box outside of his home about 9 months after her birth. Inside the box, he tucked in a letter from Elisabeth, which he'd forced her to write. The note said, "Dear parents, I am leaving you my little daughter Lisa. Take good care of my little girl. I breastfed her for about 6.5 months, and now she drinks her milk from the bottle. She's a good girl, and she eats everything else from the spoon." No one batted an eye when another child, 9-month-old Monica, showed up on the Fritz's doorstep in December of 1994. Nor did anyone ask many questions when yet another of Elisabeth Fritzl's children, this time a boy, Alexander, appeared in 1997. Shockingly, social services never questioned the random appearances of the children and allowed Joseph and Rosemary to keep them as their own children. Officials were, after all, under the impression that they were the baby's grandparents. In total, Elisabeth was impregnated by her father 8 times, 1 miscarriage, 1 that died shortly after birth, and 6 children. It's not known how long Josef Fritzl intended to keep his daughter captive in his basement. He had gotten away for it for about 24 years now, and for all the police knew, he was going to continue for another 24. However, in 2008, one of the children in the basement fell ill. Elisabeth begged her father to allow her firstborn, now 19-year-old daughter Kirsten to get medical attention. She'd fallen critically ill, and grudgingly, Josef agreed to take her to a hospital. He removed Kirsten from the cellar and called an ambulance, claiming that he had a note from Kirsten's mother explaining her condition. For a week, police questioned Kirsten and asked the public for any information on her family. Naturally, no one came forward as there was no family to speak of. The police eventually grew suspicious of Josef and reopened the investigation into Elisabeth Fritzl's disappearance. Then they started to read the letters that Elisabeth had supposedly been leaving for the Fritzes and started to see some inconsistencies in them. Whether Josef finally felt the pressure or had a change of heart regarding his daughter's captivity, he released Elisabeth from the cellar on April 26, 2008, 24 years after she innocently walked down the stairs to help her father. She immediately went to the hospital to see her daughter, where the hospital staff alerted police to the suspicious arrival. That night, she was taken into custody and questioned about her daughter's illness as well as her father's story. After making the police promise she never had to see her father again, Elisabeth Fritzl told the tale of her 24-year imprisonment. She explained that her father kept her in a basement and that she had bore 7 children. She explained that Josef was the father of all 7 and that he would come down during the night, make her watch pornographic films, and then assault her. She would go on to explain that he'd been abusing her ever since she was just 11 years old. The police arrested Josef Fritzl that night. After the arrest, the children in the cellar were released. But Rosemary Fritzl, Josef's wife, fled the home. She had allegedly known nothing about the events taking place right under her feet, and Josef would back up her story. Today, Elisabeth Fritzl's children live with their mother in an undisclosed location in Austria, known only as Village X. The home is under constant CCTV surveillance and police patrol every corner. The family doesn't allow interviews anywhere within their walls and decline to give any themselves. In fact, the lengths they take to shield themselves from the prying world are so great, even though Elisabeth, who is now in her mid-50s, the only photo of her that is available is the last photo that was taken of her when she was just 16 years old. The family is free and back together, but life hasn't been easy. The 2 sets of siblings initially struggled to adjust to their new realities. The upstairs children suffered from guilt, while the downstairs children found it difficult to bond with their siblings. After all, the upstairs children, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, had enjoyed a normal childhood with their grandparents. But the downstairs children, Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix, emerged from the cellar pale, stooped, having never even seen the sun or taken a breath of fresh air. As for Josef, he pled guilty to rape, false imprisonment, manslaughter by negligence, and incest, and is now serving a life sentence where he remains to this day at the age of 89. Immediately following the trial, Rosemary and Elisabeth had a strained relationship for obvious reasons. Since then, Rosemary moved to a small town where she lives alone, changed her name, and sells paintings and handmade crafts to make a living, if you can call it that. From what I've read, she's still financially impacted from what had happened. Her relationship with Elisabeth has gotten a little better, even to the point where she can have visits with the children that she raised while Elisabeth was in the basement. And that's the story of the girl from the basement. Thank you for listening to Tales of the Twisted, stories of the strange, weird, bizarre, and shocking. Make sure you hit that follow button for more.